Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting. I'm Councillor Steve Pitt. I'm the Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Economic Development. Just a bit of background information before we get started. Housekeeping first. Safety information. If continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts assembled by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should also sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Live web streaming. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact this meeting will be live streamed. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. There aren't any. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them on and off when you finish. They're in your control, not mine today. And then we're going to do some introductions. So we'll start with Lisa.
Lisa Gallagher, Democratic Services.
David Morman, Strategic Development Manager for Sports and Leisure.
Dave Percival, Library and Archive Service Manager.
Laura Young, Victoria Park Project Manager.
Claire Looney, Commissioning and Partnership Manager.
Sue Page from Finance.
Thank you. And members?
Councillor Russell Simpson of Hillsey Ward.
Thank you.
Councillor George Fielding, Central South Sea Ward and Labour spokesperson.
Thank you all very much. We do have one apologies for absence today, which is a bit of a shame because it was supposed to be Councillor Syme's last meeting in the role, but she's unwell today and has sent apologies. So I'd just like it recorded in the minutes, please, that we are aware that Councillor Symes is retiring from the council at the end of this municipal year, and we should place on record our thanks and recognition for her service to the council, particularly in this role prior to myself. Back before 2018, she was a cabinet member for 4 years and worked very hard during that period, including the installation of the new water feature outside Southsea Castle. Just to note one particular thing, she also started the work on the LCT project that I subsequently picked up. So our thanks and best wishes to her for the future. Members, any declarations of interest? None? Okay. Item 3 on the agenda today is the Library and Archive Service Charges update, and that's over to Dave Percival, please.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. So this is the Library and Archive Service annual report for increases in room and equipment hire charges, particularly for the Menuhin Theatre on the 3rd floor. It's really the only bookable large space in the Central Library. Now we have paying tenants on the 3rd floor. Also hire of IT training suites at Carnegie, Cosham and Central Libraries. And we've basically increased the charges for the room hire in line with inflation. I think in September, Finance told us it was 10.1 or 10%, and they've been increased in line with that, just simply for full cost recovery. We've had a really promising uptake in bookings with the Steinway grand piano that was crowdfunded in the 80s, and we've just revised the charges of the hire for that as well. And also things like piano tuning hadn't been reviewed for a number of years, and that's basically just based on full cost recovery. The charges for the History Centre, we've retained. We've done some benchmarking with neighbouring authorities, and they compare with them, so we've decided to leave those as they are. So the charges proposals are in the appendices. I don't think I've got anything more to add.
Dave, can I just check something with you? If somebody wanted to make a suite of bookings rather than a one-off, do you have the delegated authority to actually come to an accommodation on that?
We could do that, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, no questions from me, members. Councillor Fielding? Russell, you go first if you want to.
I thought for once I could go first. Actually, it was about the piano more than anything, because I know that the piano has been back. Sorry, we're here, aren't we? Back barely a year. How long has it been in there for? Because it was
in storage pretty much throughout COVID and,
yes.
and even before then. Yeah.
Because my only concern is now it's back, in my opinion, where it belongs, and we are having more use of it. It just seems a little bit. I mean, we've got to think about the people that's going to be booking this piano. You know, music, peripatetic teachers, performers that obviously have quite a rough time themselves. And I think this is more the piano than the room hire. The piano, I think, for the hire of it to go up, I know it's a very small amount, but I can tell you now that these music teachers aren't putting up their fees.
So the bookings we've had aren't from music teachers, therefore professional musicians that are doing some recitals. And I think one of the bookings we had was a series of masterclasses where they were making charges
Yes.
to the people attending that were quite
Yeah.
considerable. So I think, given it that it is, we've not reviewed piano hire charges maybe for 10 years or more, that it seemed within this kind of inflationary increase.
Well, the piano hasn't been there for 10 years, and I think that's kind of the point. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but also a lot of these groups tend to fund themselves. So that comes from them working and whatever they charge. And I know many, probably actually all music teachers that have practically frozen their prices because the students that they have, the parents simply can't afford, to pay more. So I just wanted that to really be considered when it comes to when it comes to pianos especially. We've just got it back. It'd be really good to kind of want to encourage that more, not be like, wow, now we've got it back, we're going to put it up. And I understand what you're saying, but from the other point of view, it hasn't actually been there for a very long time.
So for our, as I said, the current bookings haven't been from teachers. They've been purely for people wanting to charge entry fees for recitals or for events. So I'm happy, as I've said, to the chair to consider block bookings and other arrangements if that would help people who are struggling.
Yeah, I think we've always kind of taken the approach that we look at each case individually.
Okay.
So if things come in that clearly have a commercial return, and I've run a music venue, and I know lots of people come to me and say, "Oh, I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this for so and so." But nevertheless, you are charging for tickets, and you have an obligation to the venue to supply cost recovery as part of that ticket price, even though your ticket prices need to be low. Believe me, I know this from bitter experience. So there's always a balance. But if somebody came to us with an educational purpose, for example, then we would look at that differently automatically anyway, because obviously we've got a remit to support education and attainment. So if you do ever pick up on anything where you think a case is not being looked at correctly, then please raise it with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
George, anything? No? Okay. Cool. Okay, in which case approved. Item 4, Revenue Funding Grants 2023-2024, over to Claire Looney, and thanks, Dave.
Councillor Pitt, thank you very much. The purpose of this report is to outline the core level of revenue funding which is being proposed for a range of cultural and arts organisations based in the city. As you'll be aware, the city has a long history of supporting and funding organisations where their base is in the city or they do a substantive amount of their delivery in the city. It has been hard at times to maintain this level of funding, but we have always prioritised this over, to a certain extent, our own delivery in order to ensure that these organisations have the best base on which to secure and leverage in other funding which would benefit the city on a wider term. All revenue grant payments are supported by detailed service level agreements, and the information we require and put in those agreements has a standard set of series along with individual elements which are tailored to the organisations, what they're individually doing and how they operate. This year, I appreciate that the proposed revenue grant contribution list seems longer. However, what we have done is brought into the open a couple of other grants that were given, either by other services, such as the Ports of Pride grant, which is an allocation of funding which comes from communities and central services, or elements such as the City of Portsmouth Preserve Transport, where they actually look after and house some of our museum assets, which in the form of the vintage buses, and in return for looking after those buses for us, we enable them to provide a sort of summer bus service at various points of the city. We do very much hope that providing this funding will enable these organisations to have better, more productive conversations with key organisations such as the Arts Council. We know if we didn't fund them, those organisations would not have any ability for leverage with the Arts Council or other national funding bodies. So we see this as both important in terms of delivering into the city, but also in terms of importantly strategically placed in the city and what it's doing. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. And I know from my own conversations with the Arts Council that Portsmouth's ongoing commitment to supporting with revenue funding arts organisations is seen to be something that is a real advantage for the city and a huge cultural benefit, whereas other local authorities have taken a more, in my view, regressive approach and removed that funding entirely, which, as you say, then severely limits their ability to leverage in other grant funding from other organisations, and therefore seems to me entirely counterintuitive. Worth pointing out that with these grants, particularly in terms of Portsmouth Guildhall, Portsfest, New Theatre Royal, King's Theatre, Peter Ashley Activity Centres, the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, Aspects Visual Arts Trust. These grants have not been increased for some time. They are therefore, by definition, with the inflationary pressures, a real terms cut. The organisations accept that we are in a difficult funding round, but in my view, to take any additional funding away from them in an inflationary environment would be entirely the wrong thing to do. COVID has obviously had a major impact. People are building back after that in terms of venues and cultural destinations. I know from a report I saw yesterday that the visitor economy is still down by 38 million visitors on 2019 figures, which is huge. So there's still a lot of building back to be done, and now is not the time to be reducing that support. However, I've always been clear with all organisations that this is something we do review properly annually, and that if we feel that any organisation has reached a level where its financial resilience allows us to make a further reduction in public support in order to either increase funding for another organisation that needs it or a new organisation, then we will look at that, and it has to be done on an annual basis. So with those thoughts in mind, members, any question? I'll go to George this time.
No, I think it's useful for you to acknowledge that it is effectively a real terms cut. These are difficult times that we're in, and if any of the organisations feel as though they needed the additional support, then obviously that would be reconsidered. I think it's disappointing that only 2 of the organisations obviously got the NPO funding. It's worth noting that. But the continual work that's doing with the Arts Council is important to make sure that Portsmouth isn't left behind culturally.
Completely agree. Councillor Simpson? No. I'm continuing to meet with the Regional Director of the Arts Council, Phil Gibby, on a regular basis. I've made a very, very strong case post-MPO that Portsmouth needs to be taken more seriously. There's various work streams happening around that. But I agree with you, George, that you know, that was a bit of a negative, a bit of a shock. And how we now move forward from that is what's the most important thing. So that ongoing support for Portsmouth Creates, for example, in establishing itself as the cultural compact for Portsmouth and working with partners to leverage in other funding and being an enabler around bringing partnerships together to leverage in even more investment is absolutely crucial. And we are regularly monitoring the decisions from Arts Council on everything, because it's always been my view that Portsmouth's been underinvested in for a very long time. But the conversations are productive, and I'm hoping we're going to see some benefit of that in the near future. So thank you very much indeed. Any other comments from anyone? Claire, anything you wanted to add? No?
No, nothing specifically, thank you.
In which case, approved. And moving on to item 5, we're over to Laura for our update on Victoria Park.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. The Reviving Victoria Park briefing report provides an overview of the progress to date on the project and what we plan to deliver in the future. In summary, Portsmouth City Council have secured a grant uplift, bringing our lottery grant to 2.4 million and the total investment to 3 million. This is necessary due to the rising costs of material and construction inflation that we're experiencing at the moment. We're now working with DM Havens as our main contractor, who are busy preparing the site ahead of construction starting shortly. Both our activity and volunteering programmes have begun now, with lots of upcoming events, including the Coronation Picnic in Victoria Park. The construction programme is going to run until autumn, and the activity and volunteering programme will run into early 2026. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And it's the amount of work going on is impressive. And just from me, Laura, congratulations on securing that uplift, because I know it wasn't a straightforward thing. It had to be properly evidenced, but it has ensured that the project can continue as planned. Members, any questions?
On the information report, at 3.5.1, it mentions winter 2023. Is that meant to be 2022? Is that meant to be a timeline going through?
So from 22 to 23, yeah, over that period.
Yeah, okay. No, I think it's encouraging. I mean, obviously the planning position has been cleared on the greenhouse for some time now, so to see this moving forward and improving the area is, yeah, encouraged.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, it's really good that it's moving forward. Funnily enough, actually, I was walking through the other day, and one of the residents was asking if the rabbits and guinea pigs are coming back. So, don't think it's. I just thought I'd highlight that. So, but in general, I think people are excited that
There's always lots of interest in the animals.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Laura?
Yeah, the animals are coming back, so they're safe. They're on holiday at the moment, and they're coming back to us.
I remember spending a summer in the park in 2016 talking to lots and lots of people when there were other proposals in place that we were less than comfortable with. We're not in that place now, I'm pleased to say. Actually, the opportunity to use the park more going forward as a community hub, I think, is really significant, especially for that community. So many people down there live in flats without their own outside space. It's their front garden or back garden, effectively, and the level of engagement, as particularly that Jackie's been able to develop with that community and the relationships they have are really strong there now. And it's been great to see, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Jackie's work really needs to be praised. It's we've seen numbers that other projects just haven't seen in terms of engagement, and it's a massive factor in our success.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And she's a force of nature, quite literally, when she's down there. So, but it's brilliant, and it will give us that strength in the legacy, which is so important to the project. So, thank you very much for the update, Laura, and that's duly noted. That takes us to item 6, which is the Pyramids performance 12 months after reopening. David.
Thank you. So in 2021, Pyramids was extensively remodelled into Exploria and a large gym. And so this report looks at the performance metrics for the first full year of trading with both sides of the building open. So in financial terms, the operation deficit has reduced from 714,000 loss to a forecast of 74,000 deficit in the first full year. That's a 90% reduction. Should point out that BH Live, our operators, are liable for that trading loss, so the City Council is in a break-even position. One of the reasons the centre was so expensive to run was energy and heating the swimming pools, and so the conversion has reduced energy consumption by 2/3 and has, in spite of the rising costs of energy, halved energy bills at the centre. Just as an illustration, we looked at what the centre would cost to run if we hadn't intervened and repurposed the building and instead reopened after COVID in its standard configuration with the pools, and that would have resulted in a trading deficit of £898,000, and neither the council nor the operator had a budget for that, and so under those circumstances it would certainly have had to close. Of course, it's not just financial reasons. We're keen to keep the building open because it enables people to undertake leisure activities, physical exercise, social interaction, and so we're pleased to see that participation rates have risen after opening. If you compare Exploria now with the leisure pools before COVID, we're 27% higher participation rates. Gym memberships are rising. We're at about 89% now of the pre-COVID membership, and I would just point out that the Ravelin University of Portsmouth Ravelin Centre has opened. We know there's 1,000 community members there, and realistically some of them will have come from the Pyramids. So just to conclude, the 2021 investment has met its primary aims. 1, to keep the Pyramids open, and 2, to eliminate the need for subsidy from the council. So going forward, we officers will negotiate extensions of the contract to manage the Pyramids with BH Live, so it aligns with the end of their main leisure management contract. That will be brought to Cabinet for approval. And finally, just a few points in the report for you to note that whilst the intervention has secured the Pyramids for the medium term, we think that probably takes us up to about 2030, at which point very significant investment will be needed to keep the building open. And so consequently, work has now begun on looking at the future of the site. So we've got a strategic vision for what will replace the Pyramids potentially at the end of the decade. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And just winding back to the beginning of all of this, the options were very stark at the beginning of 2020, and that was either shut it, board it up and leave it to rot while the council decided what they were going to do with it, which would have taken a number of years, or find an interim use for it that was sensible and potentially cost effective, but also provided a better offer for families. And I think we've seen a 27% increase, I think it is, in usage, which is obviously very significant. The plan at that point was to keep Eastney Pool open while we explored where we would site another pool in the southeast of the city, which we all know is now the Bransbury site, and that's going through its last round of consultation before planning as we speak. But obviously we then had critical structural failure at the Eastney Pool site, and the closure had to be brought forward. So it's been very complex, all of this, but the deficit is, in fact, I think in all likelihood, if we hadn't had a blisteringly hot summer, we probably would have made a small surplus, which is good. So that's been wiped out, and if you compare that to over the next 10 years, we would have been looking at subsidising that building by something like £10 million, which is a very, very large chunk of what we're actually spending on building a brand new pool that's fit for purpose. So it was a tough decision to make at the time. I took a lot of flack for it, probably even lost my seat over it, but it was the right thing to do, and I stand by that. Members.
Thank you for bringing this report to the meeting. I think one of the unintended consequences of the reconfiguration of the pyramids is the loss of the gig space at the plaza. I think some work needs to be done. This is outside of this report, obviously, but we need to do something to be able to support that level of medium-sized gig venue across the city, because at the moment, speaking to performers and musicians across the city, there is definitely a gap there from the smaller venues of, say, upstairs in a pub or the Wedgwood rooms to the next big jump is to in here, really, to the studio or to the main auditorium of the Guildhall. There needs to be some investigation done as to where we can encourage or facilitate a medium-sized gig venue across the city. Because I think, as I said, it was probably not intentional regarding the reconfiguration. It has to make back the deficit that was clearly there. And I think Exploria is a great facility, so I have no qualms there. But I think, as I said, the music space loss is an unintended consequence of this.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you at the time when it happened, but the new business model that the Guildhall's been developing around the box is filling that marketplace and bringing additional successful business into the Guildhall, making it more financially resilient. So it is a bit of a balance. Ideally, it would be good to have that 700 to 1,000 standing venue space. I think that opportunity exists with the future of the Pyramids location when it's no longer, fit for its current purpose, and we need to redesign it. And it's something that I, would be keen on, as long as it is not so big that it creates a traffic nightmare for Southsea. So there's always balances in these things. But I think the opportunity's there. But in the meantime, I'm pleased that the Guildhall has stepped into that space. And I've been keeping a close eye on what they've been programming into it. And I would say the vast majority of what's coming in here now are gigs that would have gone to the Pyramids previously. So I agree, not ideal, but I think we're not losing out on that programming in the way we were a couple of years ago. And I'm glad that the Guildhall's been pioneering enough to see that gap in the market and step into it quite successfully, I think. So noted, definitely. Russell?
Yeah, it almost feels like a bit of a conflict between culture and leisure on this one, doesn't it? Because really, we're losing pools, so we had to save, another pool, and yeah, I think really. Yeah, I do agree with the medium-sized gig spaces. Even from a classical point of view as well. But I know we obviously the new Theatre Royal is obviously a lot bigger, but even so, that's not still bigger, quite as big as the Guildhall. But yeah, I think that's definitely worth considering. Looking at that medium spaces.
I'd actually go further and say that the real gap in the city is for a Guildhall studio size space that's not attached to a large scale concert venue, because that limits its ability to be flexible. As you know, my background's in theatre, and that is a need that I've identified, certainly, and that gets raised with me on a regular basis, and it's something we keep a watching brief on to look for other opportunities, particularly as the Square Tower post-COVID has had to concentrate far more on the wedding market in order to clear the backlog, and has moved away from hosting theatre on a regular basis, which has definitely caused a bit of a gap. But again, it is something that we are looking at. So those two areas in the market definitely need more consideration moving forward, and I think there are maybe a number of opportunities to do that. We'll, obviously, as we explore them, I'll give people updates. Thank you very much. Any other comments on the pyramids? Everyone happy? Okay, in which case, thank you for bringing the report, David. That's noted, and that concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much. Oh, members, just before Lisa turns off the live stream, thank you for your support and involvement in the portfolio over the last year. It's the last meeting of the municipal year, and I note neither of you are up for re-election, so I don't need to wish you personal luck. But all the best, and we'll see you the other side.